All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Energy Power Play, the Sustainable Energy Leadership Series. Where, as always, my name is Plaminotov, and our goal is to engage, educate, and inspire sustainable energy leadership. For today's session, we've got an important topic on how to make energy data your best asset in uncertain times. So, thank you everybody for that's tuned in today. This recording will be available, by the way, later on as well, if you need it. But most importantly, we're joined by a very important guest today, Mr. Mike Zamabakkides. Mike, thank you very much for being on. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Mike is a seasoned veteran in the energy industry. He's a founder and partner at Z3 Controls, and working on it since April 2012. He's worked with a variety of clients, Mike, I believe institutional, industrial, manufacturers, all of the above. And you've done a lot of remarkable projects. So it's really good to have you on here to focus on energy data, energy metering, how to make the best use of this, how to get started, how to fix your energy monitoring problems. So I'd just like to open this conversation. I'm very happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on, and looking forward to the discussion in the webinar today.
Perfect. Mike, to kick things off, tell us a bit about Z3 Controls. How did you get started? Kind of where has it gone over the last decade and a half? Where's it at today? And maybe most importantly, what are you most excited about in this kind of fight against climate change and optimizing energy and efficiency?
Well, okay, I'll tell you. We'll go way back, as the DJs always said. Let's go way back. So it started officially in 2012. April of 2012, where the company was registered, but the technology was around. In 2011, we designed and developed and started manufacturing the first sub-metering modules here in Canada, in Ontario, in and around probably before the summer of 2011, where we started doing the marketing, the beta testing, the alpha testing, what have you, of the products. And then we formed the company officially in 2012, and we just hit the ground running, working with utilities, working with governments, working with energy engineering companies, broadening the market with obviously hitting up industrial clients, commercial clients, multi-res, anybody. Our old adage was anybody outside of a single family home, we do business with, right? Whether it's outdoor application, that's our better. So we're market agnostic when it comes to it, right? When it comes to energy solutions and energy metering and monitoring and the optimization of that data.
Perfect. No, that's great, and that's an impressive history, and the fact that you manufacture some of these systems yourself. And by the way, Z3, where is Z3 located, or should I say Z3 now? Now that maybe we should use the Canadian version.
Maybe we should. It depends. It depends on what side of the border you are. Z3 one side, Z3 on other side. But we manufacture our products, our data loggers, our NetMeter Omni 8C, the data logger, and our NetMeter 3P600, the three-phase 600-volt meter that we started the company with years ago. We manufacture all of that in Vaughan, and we get a lot of the parts too. From areas in Markham. So it's an Ontario and it's a Canadian-made products actually, and solutions.
Amazing. Canadian-made solutions for Canadian excellence.
Correct.
Beautiful. So why don't I ask you this question directly? And I noticed, folks that enrolled onto this session today, they include anything from energy managers, electrical managers, plant managers. But if we were to go direct, how does an organization, make energy data its best asset, especially in times like these where the economics can be a little shaky and things are a little bit tight.
That's a great question. Well, it's always good when we're looking at energy monitoring and energy data. I know a lot of companies out there, they're doing the soft approach, essentially getting software, getting that interval data from the electrical, the water, the gas mains coming in, doing all the analysis they need to do, and then going from there. What we suggest on our side is getting that real time granular data from the mains. That's the most essential energy data you can start with, right? Get that
Hmm.
time data in, utilizing quarterly solutions like ours, like our NetMeter 3P600, putting that into the overall mainframe or the starting point of the energy journey, and then going from there. And after that, what we always suggest after optimizing that data and analyzing that data from the mains, whatever it may be, however many mains it may be, and what kind of a facility or group of facilities it may be in whatever market, after that, go and kind of look at the various processes, the manufacturing, the other areas in the plant and the facility in the building or buildings or at the site, and kind of maybe go with the most troublesome areas first, the big energy hogs, for lack of a better word,
Hmm.
go from there as needed, right? Whether it's in the form of an audit or optimization or just a simple alarm system saying, here we have company A, X amount of megawatts per year, X amount of cubic feet, cubic meters a year, and let's see what we can do with that. How can we optimize it best, right? And let's see if there's any efficiencies or deficiencies throughout, pinpointing it with essentially a real time energy data system, right? The alarming feature, I think, is probably number one on the energy uh, data asset side of things.
The alarms and notifications. So you're saying start with the main, get real time, get granular, get accurate data at the main, then work your way towards some of the other either large energy users or problematic areas.
Correct.
And you know what? That's exactly what we see. Rodan Energy. We are actually the largest meter service provider in Ontario, and a lot of our work is wholesale metering, where we'll take transmission connected loads and we see their main power line. But our approach is very much the same way. We'll get a meter at the main from Z3 or somebody else at this time, and it's surprising how much you get just from enabling real time visibility of your main load. A lot of folks are still behind on that, and once you enable it, it really starts to open some opportunities. So I want to hear about some of the applications and sort of case studies that you've run through, but maybe I'll just share, at least from my perspective, where we found a ton of value putting this relatively inexpensive, now as you mentioned, Canadian-made
Mhm.
metering solution at the main. So, like we do a lot with managing peaks, right? Like looking at like what does a facility's peak look like, what can they get down to, and how do we monetize that ability to curtail. And without that real-time metering, you're really kind of taking a shot in the dark.
Correct.
And then once we see folks put in the meter and we grant them the visibility, without even metering the other piece of the facility, they'll go through an exercise where they'll walk around and they'll turn something off and see how does this impact my load. And in Ontario, like this is a very, like, it's worth a ton of money. You can wipe out 50-60% of your electricity bill by responding 40 50 hours a year. And how do you do that unless you know what you can curtail, how you're actually going to do it if you're called to do it. And real-time metering at the main is a great starting point. So that's one of the applications that, at least from Roda side, that we see as being it kind of pays for itself within a couple hours, and is not complicated to install and to put in, and just offers a ton of value.
Absolutely.
um, Talk to me about some of the other applications that you see. Like, obviously, I'm assuming some of your folks are also, interested in doing demand response and global adjustment.
Yes, yes. GA, when you're looking at global adjustment, when you're looking at demand response with the services that Rodan have, you want to have that robust, real time, and most importantly, that we've seen, accurate,
Hmm.
right? I've got a lot of people upset when I kind of use the use cases of the inaccuracy of some systems that are out there, and it pisses a lot of people off, but I have to be very clear on it, right? Because you need to get that pinpoint accuracy. They think, oh, if it's a little bit off here, a little bit off there. No, that's the one golden tie-in, especially between Rodan and Z3. Rodan's GA and DR services combined with metering products such as the NetMeter 3P600 from Z3 Controls tied together, especially for GA. That's the starting point. Like you said too, Platinum, the savings are incredible. I'm not going to say instantaneous, but almost almost instantaneous, right? You shave off those peaks, you're saving a hell of a lot of money, a
Hmm.
lot of money, right? Now, looking at some use cases out there, we'll start with a big thing on the commercial side. We'll start with an admin center that we did for a client of ours when they were looking at an unoptimized HVAC system. So they're looking at it, they
Yeah.
put the metering on there, they see the monitoring, things are looking good throughout the months. It goes up a bit. Obviously, air conditioning is being used in the summertime. Great. June, July, August, September, things are cooling off a little bit. But then into October, November, when they put the metering system on, actually before that, they saw that the air conditioning, ever so slightly, was still on, right? And they
Hmm.
got that data from utilizing one of our metering systems and utilizing the analysis software on there. And from there, it was X amount of savings. I think it was about uh, two or 300 something thousand in savings just off that optimized. And you couldn't really tell in the building. You couldn't tell that the air conditioning was on, but with the metering system on the unoptimized HVAC system, they showed. And obviously, when they got that data, the people got involved. They optimized the HVAC system and they solved the problem. Right. That was one area we worked on. And I mean, I, go ahead. Should I give you the floor to you?
No, I was gonna say I'm just thinking about, when I've run into certain situations like that, and the folks that I'm working with, and I'm just thinking about when you give them that information, knowing that the person you're giving it to is probably the person who should have should have ran the system
Yeah,
properly.
exactly.
And you know what we can do, and at the end of the session we'll see if there's some engagement, but we had a few energy managers
Sure.
on this, and maybe at the end of the session we'll open up the chat and see if we have any other interesting stories like this, because I imagine in this case, right, so you're running air conditioning in the cold weather, and you're probably running the heating to supplement for the extra air conditioning you're putting on. So now
Yeah,
you're using more gas, more electricity, for
exactly.
something that, you know, frankly could have been identified, quickly with something as simple as a energy monitoring device.
Exactly. And that's the area too we have to be careful in, because sometimes the people that bring us in, we don't want to make them look bad. So we have to tell them slightly, hey, this says this, this, and this. We would suggest these little changes here, right? So we're very we put white gloves on. We're very careful with that. We don't want to insult or step on
Yep.
anybody's toes, but we help them out with their journey, definitely.
Well, that's the beauty when you're dealing with data. There's a little bit of artistic form, but the data
Right.
is is the data, right?
Data doesn't lie. Exactly.
Very good. So yeah, and like, what was the reaction when you delivered some of those results and you said, "Hey, by the way, your AC is running all winter and you're wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars." Like, what was the reaction of the folks once you relayed that?
Well, it was. I'm not going to say it now, but it was a couple of expletive words, right? But a lot of gratitude afterwards, right? For I think the main thing too, the minimal amount of investment to get that data to figure out a problem. I mean, 1 meter on an HVAC system, with obviously the work of the people monitoring, our help with them too as well. It was a combined effort, right?
Hmm.
Because technology is good, data is good, but you need the people too as well.
Right.
It's the holy trinity of engineering: people, process, technology, right? You
Right.
need all three. One's not going to replace the other, or so I hope it doesn't replace the other. But that's kind of how we go about doing things. And it was, I guess, just the minimal amount of investment to get that maximum ROI, right?
Hmm.
That was kind of the value add that we had given in this particular situation, and a lot of other
Yeah.
ones too as well.
And I'm sure they opted for some simple alerting that says, "Hey, by the way, if this happens again, I'd like X, Y, and Z person notified, that my AC
Correct.
is running in in the month of December."
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Let me change course a little bit
Sure.
because energy monitoring per se is not a new concept. I think in the past, a lot of the larger companies, automotive OEMs, they started down this process probably like 20 years ago. Some of them even earlier,
Mhm.
and some of them have done a good job, putting hundreds of meters in and making good sense of that data. But in other times, I've also seen folks where I remember walking into a automotive plant and we're looking at a power quality solution. And I asked, hey, do you have any more data outside of these utility bills? Mind you, this is somebody that's, paying probably 150, 200,000 on electricity every month, right? And they said, this is basically what we use is these electricity invoices. Can you work with these? And I said, well, let's get a little more granular. Can we get hourly data? Do you have any metering? They said, oh, we've got this meter. It's sitting out back. We took a look at it, and it was a high quality power quality meter. My guess is probably when they purchased it, they north of $15,000 to get this meter put in. And I said, wow, this is great. All right, let's pull the data out of here. And the plant manager said, you know what, Plummet, I disconnected that thing a long time ago. We put it in, and we can never get it to match the utility bill,
Mhm.
no matter how much we tried. So then I decided I don't want to look at it. So the reason I say the story, because I think this happens not very often, but often enough for us maybe to have a conversation on, you having done this and kind of Rhoda having done this for a long time. But I want to hear your perspective, like for folks trying to put in new energy monitoring systems,
Mhm.
or for folks trying to improve the accuracy or kind of make these numbers match up in a way that makes sense. Like how do you go about that? Whether it's a new project, how do you go about lining it up so that way this intelligent asset doesn't just go to waste?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing is to start with the accuracy. Now, without tooting the horn of Z3 controls in our product, specifically our Net Meter 3P600, it is an extremely accurate system, right? And being obviously a Canadian company and manufacturing in Canada, we tried to implore Canadian organizations, hey, take a look at this, take a look at the cost, more so take a look at the return on investment and the minimal cost and the minimal investment to do it. And I think in looking at that, what you're talking about, Clement, in accuracy, right? That specific opportunity, that specific client you were talking about when they took out the data because they couldn't match it. We have a story similar where we were brought in back in the CDM days with a utility company that said, okay, we have a client and they need some accurate data. So they bought a few of our meters, they put it on the mains, and they found out that our metering data wasn't, it was more accurate than the actual other data coming in from the utility. And now we were in a bind. The utility CDM group had brought us in, and now our products are saying that their data, because, mind you, it wasn't the utility's fault, because of the existing metering system that was at the facility that we were at, was a fairly inaccurate one. We had to tie in our metering system there in order for them to get that accurate data. So it makes a lot of sense too to look at the proven track records and the use cases of any real-time energy data solutions you're looking at, whether it's Z3, whether it's Rodan or anybody else there on the market. You need that accuracy, because a lot of times, like you said, that $15,000 system, who knows who made it, but it doesn't always mean that if company A, B, or C are the Coca-Cola of energy monitoring, or BAS, or energy automation, or energy management, or metering, it doesn't mean they're the most accurate. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people, they got stuck on it. They think, oh, this company's been around for 200 years, we're going to go with them. And it's like, no, you're spending a lot of money. And without naming names, a lot of companies and institutions in Ontario, and there's quite a large list of them, have spent a lot of money on very expensive, we'll call them legacy Coca-Cola energy companies, where they could have spent a lot less on fairly more accurate solutions here in Canada from Canadian organizations, such as you and your team at Rodan, and us at Z3, and our partners too, and a couple of our competitors too as well in Canada.
Hmm. Now that brings us to an interesting point, and I've seen some of this firsthand as well, where you're talking about, especially at the institutional level, where you have an RFP go out, and they may need uh, a large number of meters and software. So it's not a small project, and it kind of hurts a little bit, like when it goes outside, right? Like when those kind of projects end up outside of Canadian companies, right? And I think that's what you're talking about, and
Right.
not just because of the Canadian pride and the newly instilled Canadian pride with all the things that are happening, but also because you start to compare the financials, and what the solutions do and how they compare. And sometimes you have this really expensive solution that like this $15,000 meter, which is not a bad solution, by the
Mhm.
way, and it does some good things in power quality, and sometimes you have to spend the money to get what you need. But then you have these, on the software side, you have these overly complex subscription based systems that are difficult to upgrade. And we've seen this too, where we get called in after we lose an RFP for metering, for folks to say, "Oh, by the way, we put these meters in, but we can't get it to talk to the system.
Mhm.
You know, can you help us?" And it's one of those situations where having somebody boots on ground, somebody that's based here, that can go to your facility, that can scope things out, that's been specialized in this for a long time, and as a bonus, is Canadian, is really really key.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It is, because I mean, in some instances, there's times where, say, like on the chip side, semiconductors, there's a growing, obviously, industry in Canada, but a lot of times companies have to go elsewhere, have to go to the States or
Hmm.
Europe or anywhere else, or Asia to get it. Understandable. But on the energy monitoring side and management, and on the solution side, specifically with sub-metering, which what we're talking about today for that energy data, there's a plethora of Canadian companies, again, such as Z3 Controls and Rodan, and I'll be altruistic on this, and our partners and some of our competitors, where clients in Canada can go to them and sometimes get more accurate solutions, better solutions in terms of capability and functionality, and quote unquote cost effective solutions too as well, right?
Hmm.
And like you said, at arm's length, where they can come and
Absolutely.
they can support their clients here, right? Have a face to face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Good. So let's not beat up too much on institutions that have chosen to
Not at all.
grant their business somewhere else. But it's a good conversation to keep in mind, because there
Absolutely.
will be more projects coming up, and buy Canadian is again more important now than it has been in a long time.
Mhm.
Um, some of the other things that we're seeing, and maybe I'd like to get your approach on this, because we focus a lot on the power system side, and our software that we build in house, it can tie in power, gas, all these different characteristics based on what the customer is looking for. um, we're seeing more folks asking for very specific information related to their ESG now, where they want to see, I want to know this widget that was just built, how much energy did it take? What was the CO2 associated with building this one piece of equipment? Was there any water used into it? And they want to get pretty specific because some of the folks, um, like Toyota, for example, they're going and they're asking their suppliers as part of their Scope 3 emissions to validate. Show me the emissions associated with the product that I'm buying from you.
Mhm.
So I guess my question to you is, when you look at that scenario, how do you approach that at Z3?
So in regards to outside of electricity, basically, say like
Uh,
water and gas and all the other ones. Well, on our side, I mean, we always look at electricity as number one, right? It's
mhm,
always it's the highest cost depending on what market you're looking at. It applies to all the production or process equipment in any kind of building, whether it's MERB, commercial, industrial, whether it's electric arc furnace or a motor or whatever it is. We, on the technology side, we always suggest the most non-intrusive, open approach, right? Where basically you can start with that electricity data, get that gas and water data too, like we were mentioning earlier in the conversation today at the mains, and then go and get that data throughout the entire plant, and then do all the analysis that you require out of that. Whether it's like what you mentioned, yield analysis for I'm making plastic out of a blow molding machine or an extrusion piece of equipment, and I need to figure out what the yields are, right? Or on palletizers in some other packaging companies and bottling plants or whatever it may be, right? Obviously, start with the utility data, electricity, water, and gas, and then incorporate everything else into it as you see fit, right? That's more
mhm,
so on the technology side. On the ESG side, we're looking at the sustainability obviously too, but it's always good to start with that and then combine everything together. I mean,
mhm.
if you need to do the CO2 and the carbon and the GHG and the emissions, obviously utilize whatever software that the client has or that you will be offering or your partners will be offering. And make sure too, I mean, on our end, we always do it. Make sure that the metering system that you're using has that open architecture too. So you can shoot that data, like we were mentioning before, for GA or for DR, as Z3 controls net meter 3P to the Rodin mainframe for GA, and bam, Bob's your
Mhm.
uncle, right? You get that instantaneous ROI. So on our end, we focus on the technology first. Get that technology, then get that data, and then from the data, do all the analysis you require for essentially the E and the S in the ESG.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And actually, now that we're having this conversation, I'm almost getting more excited about doing some of these projects together because the way I see it is when you have somebody as kind of functioning as an integrator and a software provider that's able to provide some custom parameters, you know that's a starting point, right? So for example, we get the requirements. The customer wants to track energy at X, Y, and Z for this and this purpose, and then we can go out and get the best, most accurate meters that are reliable and that communicate to a system, and then layer in some simple equations and algorithms to give the output of what the customer is actually looking for, whether it's
Right.
CO2 per pound of production, electricity per yard of fabric, or whatever that
But it
figure
may be.
may be. Very good. When we talk about and I think and I understand you that Z3 is more focused on power. That's the first solution. I'm just curious. I know historically, and we've done some of these too, but natural gas and water monitoring tend to be somewhat intrusive and sometimes a little more expensive or costly to
Mhm.
implement. Um, do you get involved in some of those projects? And are there any new innovations that are maybe making this easier than cutting a pipe and and putting in some kind of damper and sensor?
Yeah, I mean, we have a product, a solution at the end of the day, the Omni, which is for the low voltage side of things, for the instrumentation stuff, for gas, for water, for sub metering, that essentially acts as a data collection and energy data collection hub to integrate a number of, we'll call them instrumentation sub meters at a facility, right? And where we do a lot of business with companies, partners, and suppliers of ours that have the standardized meters for steam, the ultrasonic ones, and all that. But
Hmm.
what we're seeing more and more is non-intrusive, right?
Hmm.
Where it's basically clamp on, and strap on metering systems that can tie back into our Omni, and then from there the client can figure out where that data is going to go. If it's a high security area and they're crazy about cybersecurity, it might has to stay within the facility. It can stay there. If they have to shoot it out to a platform, we've got a number of different solutions on the non-intrusive side. And I think with what you're mentioning too, Clement, on for water and for gas and some of the sensors, the more non-intrusive that they are, that we're doing on our end at Z3 and that our clients are doing, it applies to a lot of the markets that are out there, right? So even though industrial and commercial is
Hmm.
our main markets, then people on the massive retail portfolio side, the MERV, the mixed use side, all the other markets outside of commercial and industrial, the healthcare side, it becomes a lot more simpler for them, right?
Right.
Because what they don't want to do, even someone running a hospital or a major commercial facility, and I had it before too, saying, Mike, we love your solutions. We don't have the time to go in and install it. So the more non-intrusive we make it on our end as a solution provider, the easier it is for the clients. And that's, I think, one of the most exciting things that we're doing right now with ourselves and some of our partners, non-intrusive, right? So it's essentially
Right.
snap on, clap on, strap on metering equipment, gas, water, electricity, and then they're laughing at the end of the day, getting all that data and getting that infinite ROI that they deserve.
Yeah. No, and that's so important, right? Because if it the moment it becomes complicated and difficult, and you have to bring in trades to cut pipes open, and you know, those can block the project. And then what ends up happening is a couple years later they say, oh, you know, we realized we were leaking steam, and we should have had this monitoring when we first talked about it. So yeah, I think some of those, non-intrusive clamp on type of solutions, uh, like how are you finding the accuracy on those? Has there been any studies published on some of those? Because flow meters, ultrasonic meters, are they considered as reliable as some of the traditional kind of dampers that you would put in to measure water and flow and steam?
Well, it on our end, I mean, the way we see it, it all depends, right? But the accuracy, it's they're fairly accurate, right? And depending obviously on the solutions, right? Depending on how accurate they have to be or what the tolerance is, say on the
Hmm.
industrial side, where they say, okay, we have a number of steam lines or a number of gas lines for our production or our process equipment, for our kilns or whatever, right? We'll give them options for the solutions that they need, right? If they need
Hmm.
that pinpoint accuracy and it has to be 100% accurate, and they're willing to pay the budget, then we can go with the traditional ultrasonic meters that we've used in the past and the ones where you cut the pipe and all that stuff. If they're looking for still accurate, but a little bit less accurate, but still fairly accurate, but they want hundreds or even thousands of points, right? Then we have those easier solutions too on the strap on, clamp on, and snap on side of things, right? But on electricity, we're without tooting our own horn, we always push the net meter 3P600 specifically at the mains, and then on anything relating to energy that's giving you problems in your facility,
Hmm.
the net meter 3P600 is the choice for it, right?
That's
Shameless
the most
self
accurate.
promotion right there. Yes, for the accuracy on
but but but
electricity.
but you know what? It needs to happen, because it wouldn't be like probably about a handful of times where I've seen where we had to install and put in different meters, and just to show that the utility company was overbilling somebody, right? Like we never think that the utility can make a mistake like that, but it does happen. And at an industrial facility, at a data center, it does happen. So independent information is very very important. And I like what you mentioned there for folks listening. When you're going down the project of asset level energy monitoring, have an idea of what you need the data for, right? So that way you can set thresholds. Do I need 100% accurate data, or am I okay with 97% if it costs me 50% less, or whatever the figure is to get this implemented? Yeah, and the other thing I say is, it seems like there's two things. Start with the end goal in mind. Don't just start monitoring things because it'll be cool to have data. Try to solve the actual problem. But to your point, I think you mentioned this earlier. Does the 80-20 rule apply? Do you get 80% of the bang of your buck by zooming in on 20%, probably your largest loads, or what you consider maybe your most problematic loads? Is that kind of the numbers you're seeing when you get into the asset level monitoring?
You know what? We never like to use statistics because every client, in a good way, is like a snowflake. Every facility is different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now we can take the major loads. We can say, okay, commercial, multi-res, HVAC systems, number one. Then lighting, the mains, right? Start with those. On the industrial side, the mains, and then what we always do is we always tell our clients, start with the major problem points, the major pain points. Is the reason and the rationale for you getting metering solutions from us and from our partners, is it because you want to get that real time data just to have the continuous monitoring as an alarm system? Or do you want to see a problem, pinpoint a problem? Maybe it's a voltage sag or a spike. Maybe it's power factor, right? Uh, is it an issue with maybe leaks in the building? So you want to get a good mainstay on what the water mains are, so you can see the pressure drops and what the regular pressure may be. It all depends on the individual problems, but we always tell our clients, whether it's just say an overall continuous monitoring solution that they want, which is mandated from corporate or whatever, great, we can help them on that journey. Ourselves and our partners, we have a huge Canada-wide and worldwide network, and we love to help them on their solution journey. But the one thing, Plamen, is they have to tell us where the main problem is. Once they tell us, you know what, Mike and Z3 and everybody, we've got 2 kilns in this facility. They're giving us a crap load of problems. Help us out. Bam, we start there. We don't know about the data coming out of the mains. We have questions about it. Start there. Start with the most problematic areas, and then everything else. It's not simple, but it's simpler at the end of the day, right?
Right.
That's our rationale, the way we see it with all the clients.
When you have a guiding light, I remember working with another energy management company. This is a long time ago, and we were looking at a facility that had everything basically metered. And you're talking about the HVAC loads, production loads, mains, gas, power, everything. And when we were going through their system and the data, what also started to become really important is, outside of what you're monitoring and what you can see, is, well, what is the missing piece? Like, why am I actually, like, my main is recording 1 million, but all my other components are recording 900,000, right? And then there's another question to be asked about what's missing, and where is this kind of ghost phantom power loads going, because we've metered everything. And then it becomes to start a bit like an Easter egg hunt. But I remember that conversation as you were talking, as something that stood out, that even when you become really advanced, if you're paying attention to the data and you're analyzing it correctly, there's always something else that you can optimize, granted that you're using the data intelligently. Very good. Interesting. Um, curious about this because we've been getting a lot of inquiries, and we've been talking to a lot of folks now in the data center space.
Mhm.
So a lot of big loads coming, a lot of critical loads where any outage, power quality, reliability is a key component. Are you starting to see some work with the data center space, and kind of how do you see energy monitoring and metering kind of fall into that space? Is it like everywhere else, or is there a unique application in your perspective?
Well, it's unique. I think data centers, where it's not a huge segment or subsegment of our clientele and our portfolio in terms of the clients that we work with and we manage, it's there. And I'll tell you why. On obviously the power side, but on the cybersecurity side, that's number one for them,
Hmm.
right? It's important for all of us individually and corporations and organizationally and governmentally throughout the world and throughout the country. But data centers, number one is cybersecurity. Now, the
Hmm.
one great thing for us, the advantage for our company, is our solutions have open API in them. So they can work with a platform, or they can, if a client, say like a data center, says everything has to be internal, we can't have anything going to the cloud no matter what, depending on maybe a solution for GA and for DR, if it's plausible or possible with Rodan, we see that security element on our end. That's the
Hmm.
interest there, and we do a little bit of work with companies on on the intelligence side of things that have some fairly secure clients, without going into specific names, that specifically purchased our solutions and did business with us and continue to do business with us because of the fact that we're giving them that accurate data, but it can act as a standalone system too, which is
Right.
anybody that's looking out there, say on a data center or a defense company or somewhere in between, if they're looking at something on the cyber security side where something can operate separately, not having to go to the internet or outside the facility, then that's a very good value add that we have on our end, right?
Hmm. So you're talking about security protocols and
Security protocols and the fact that it can act as a standalone system too. They say, listen, we need an energy monitoring system that can't go anywhere else and has to stay within the facility. That's where we see, I mean, not just in data centers and in, we'll say, defense
mhm,
companies, but similar areas where they're very, very paranoid about security. We're a very good solution and a very good value add for that. And some of our partners too as well, right?
mhm. Interesting. No, that's a good note, and something that often gets overlooked until you get to the contracting phase, and then they talk about where is the data stored, how is the communication done, and
Correct.
who has access, and who can potentially have access.
Correct. The 90 page of legalese, legal work, where I'm a
Mhm.
technology guy. I'm not a legal guy.
Very good. I'll pick your brain a little bit about what one more application before we break for questions and wrap it up. So far, just really good conversation, and I think every time you and I talk, I learn something a little bit new and a little bit different, and it gets me a little more excited about getting some of these more of these projects off the ground. Um, Looking at municipalities, for example, so we like Rodan does a ton of work with municipalities,
Mhm.
large ones, small ones, City of Toronto, Windsor, and it seems like folks in municipalities generally have kind of the old school way of getting data from the utility bill to some kind of platform, and they have that type of visibility. Are you seeing any interest or any particular angles where energy metering and real-time monitoring becomes something that municipalities should be looking at and implementing, or have you done some of these real-time applications yourself so far?
We have, and one municipal client currently where we're residing in right now, right where I'm at, the region here, client of ours, extremely advanced, extremely advanced in monitoring, in the sub metering, in the process of everything they do. Um, So, and I think too, on the municipal side, a good chunk of Ontario municipalities and cities are doing a very good job. From what
Hmm.
we've seen, the regional municipal clients that we have, and that some of our partners and some of our competitors have too as well, they're very good. But I think overall, throughout, we'll say Canada, not just Ontario, that on the municipal side, um, and not just the municipal side too, but every other side, a lot of people still aren't doing submetering and energy monitoring, right? Which is, and I think I had mentioned to you in our previous conversations, the number that was thrown at me at I think it was a BDC event that I went to a couple of years ago. They had said that Canada ranks 17th out of 18 uh, advanced economies in regards to technology adoption,
Hmm.
right? So not just focusing on the municipal side, but overall, throughout all the segments and subsegments and markets that we deal with, and that our partners and our competitors too, and the like that they deal with, there's a major stepping stone still for technology adoption, right?
Right.
More and more people are doing it now, but a lot more people can still do it, right? That I think it's not just on the you had mentioned on the municipal side, but it's on the overall markets, industrial, commercial, institutional, all levels, right?
Hmm.
Multi-res, there's a huge area there where they can adopt the technology, but it's still it's they're slow to do it, right? And that's a
I,
major problem we've seen, and I'm sure you and your team of Rodan have seen too as well, right? Within Canada.
yeah, I've thought about this before, and because we do business in the U.S. as well, and
So do we.
there's right there's a general kind of attitude in Canada where it feels more risk averse, and the process is usually a little elongated to get a decision.
Correct.
Where when you're talking to, at least my perception with some American folks in the U.S., there's almost this sentiment of, I think this makes sense. Like, no, like a lot of folks you deal with are not energy monitoring or demand response experts. So, there's a level of persuasion, and nobody's 100% convinced of anything until they do
Mhm.
it. Right. So, but there's an attitude of, you know what, we're going to try these five things, and I'm okay if a couple of them don't work. At least that's kind of the impression that I get is, I don't want to say gamble, but there's a little bit more of this kind of adventurous spirit in the U.S. where we're willing to try something new, and if it doesn't work out as we thought, we can revisit it after. But we know that if we try a number of things, some of them will work out, and the ones that do work out are going to more than compensate for the couple that didn't. Meanwhile, in Canada, it feels very often that it's a little more passive and a little more risk averse. We want to make sure everything is on board and everybody's on board, and trying to minimize the risk. And interestingly enough, when it comes to energy metering and monitoring, at the end of the day, you know there's a huge benefit when it comes to risk and having visibility, right? Like, you can use this data in so many different ways, right?
Exactly.
If you can catch a electrical system going wonky before it starts vibrating, or worse, smoking or catching fire, like, that kind of preventative maintenance is is a really great way of managing risk.
It
And you know
is
what?
absolutely. Yeah.
And maybe we'll wrap it up with this.
Sure.
Since I mentioned preventative maintenance, talk about energy monitoring as a form of preventative or proactive maintenance per se.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a couple of the areas, and I was just iterating that in my mind as you were talking about it. I mean, some of the applications, even though we talk about it within Ontario and Canada, I'm sure a lot of the people that are watching right now, when we're talking about, I mean, retrofits, whether it's incentive based or non-incentive based, you want to get that picture of before, during, and after, right?
Hmm.
One area with energy monitoring is whether you're putting in, say, a new turbo blower for a water treatment or wastewater treatment plant, and it's crazily energy efficient, or you're putting in a new LED system, or you're putting in anything on the electrical side, right? That's claimed to be super energy efficient, a compressed air system or whatever it may be.
Hmm.
Eventually, you're going to get that steady creep throughout, maybe not months, but years. You want to have that real time accurate monitoring system on there to detect that, right? To detect any anomalies. And then on an anomaly side, you want to have that real time energy system to detect a spike or a drop.
Right.
Maybe they're normal, maybe they're not. You want to have that in there to do even beyond just the incentives, but the methodology of measurement and verification and monitoring and targeting. You need that monitoring and measurement system, such as the one we provide and our partners and our competitors, without touting Z3 controls horns too much. You want to get that in there, right? I see a lot of people right now, they're just doing raw calculations or invoice analysis, and I might insult some people now. No, you need that real time data. You need the sub metering, hook it up to the mains, put it out everywhere, shoot that data out for DR and GA, utilize M&T, M&V, retrofit, whether it's incentives or just the methodology behind it, auditing, alarm systems, power factor on the power side, sag spikes, all that. And that's just a little bit, right? On top of that, a
Hmm.
continuous monitoring system. And on top of that, the sky's the limit. And if anybody's interested, obviously, at the end of it, they can contact myself. I have too much information in regards to use cases and applications and definitive ROI on why sub metering and metering works.
Mike, you're preaching to the choir. I'm a convert ever since I started studying energy monitoring systems. Before I got my CEM even, and I like to almost compare it to like your body, right? Like energy is the heart of your operation. Without energy, you're not making anything, and you know it's kind of like the blood in our body. And
Exactly.
you go to the doctor once a year to get a checkup. They might tell you something, but nowadays, we're coming up with these smart devices that can monitor our health in real time. They're monitoring our breathing patterns, our heart rate, and all these different parameters that can early diagnose any serious issues, so you can get ahead of it before it becomes a big problem. And I look at energy in the very same way. And the question always becomes, can you do it in a cost effective way, and can you make it pay for itself within a couple years? And I think the answer to all of these from our experience is yes, and yes, with
Yes,
with the right with the right strategy, the right end goal in mind, and with the right partners. So
correct.
you're preaching to the choir, but you know that's where we are. We've got a few more minutes.
Sure.
If there's any questions at all from our audience, I'm happy to you can drop them in the chat. I'll have the chat open over here, and here I'll pull it up on the screen. If there's anything at all in the next couple minutes, we're happy to answer it. Mike, in the meantime, if you have any other closing remarks before the session, feel free. And for our folks that are tuned in, the next session is in 2 weeks from now, and we will be talking about mini nukes or SMRs, and are they coming to a neighborhood near you? We touched on data centers. Will they be powered by nuclear facilities next door? We'll be diving into some of those conversations. Um, I don't see much in the chat, so maybe with that said, Mike, we'll wrap this one up.
Sure.
But great having you on the Energy Power Play series. Love to continue the conversation, and best of success with everything. And final words: let's support Canadian businesses all the way. And before you wrap it up, I have one question actually. There it is. Consider a situation where a malfunction in a smart meter is causing peaks in the data reporting, for which the quantity is matching closely with the energy data due to facilities energy and efficiency. To address this, hold on. I'm going to put this question up. This is a long question,
I'm
Sri.
reading it right now. The strategies to ensure that the consistency is the straight faulty metering, but not covered by the existing building inefficiency. This would depend on a lot of factors, actually. This would depend on quite a number of factors. When we were looking at the examples that we mentioned previously, where the utilities metering system or the billing says the amount is here, but ours said no, the amount is here at a lower level, right? Obviously, we found out that that was because of the specific physical meter that they had within the client that we were looking at, right? So in regards to that, that depends. It depends how what the metering system is, what even is the metering system that the utility is using themselves, right? And is
Hmm.
that sub metered by the client with another, say, utility grade or revenue grade system? And are we tying into that? So it all depends, right? How that data is coming in, right? So it's a multifaceted approach, but it depends on that.
Hmm. So in this situation, trying to consolidate this is where you'd want to reach out to somebody that's spent some time and looked at a few different scenarios to help diagnose these. But yeah, great question, actually, great question. uh we'll give a countdown to three, one, two, three, if there's any more questions. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. Both myself, Mike, I'm sure you're available on LinkedIn to handle any questions at all about metering, about any of the topics that we discussed today. And thank you everybody for taking time on your lunch break. Thank you, Sri, for the question, and thank you very much, Michael, for joining me today.
Plamet, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me today. It was great.
Thank you.